This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by BrilliantAgile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
BrilliantAgile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
This Agile Life, episode 93, direct from Agile 2015.
Agile bangers and mash.
The software industry transforms more and more every day. Agile methods are quickly replacing traditional ones. The question is, are you agile enough? This podcast is devoted to agile and lean software development. Time to welcome your agile coaches on This Agile Life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Agile Life, direct from Agile 2015 in Washington, D.C. My name is Jason Tice, and we thank you for joining us for a few highlights from the conference. I have found some people to join me tonight. Who else is there?
Hey, this is Natalie Simonson. Hello again. Said hello yesterday and going on again. Day two.
Day two, yes.
Woo-hoo.
And I think I hear some other people there.
Yeah, this is Joe Naumann, sometime listener, first-time contributor.
Well, welcome, Joe. We appreciate having you here to join us live. We're all sitting at a round table, so we can all see each other here. And is there anyone else, is John Sextra going to appear?
Oh, that would be
I
awesome.
think we have to say his name 3 times.
Can I fill in for him? I'll be Sextra.
Is there another superhero here? Who is that other superhero?
Nobody will know the difference because I haven't introduced myself. I am Rose Hemlock. I'm Nerf Herder and Agile Coach at CenturyLink Cloud. Happy to join Natalie and Joe and Jason tonight.
Really? Well, thank you for joining us. So it is. We are now recording. This is the end of the first day of the conference, and we thought we'd get together and talk about a few of the things we've learned today. So who wants to get us started?
Pick me. Ooh, pick me.
Don't pick Natalie.
So today I had a great first session, so I'm super pleased that things went off very, very well. The session I went to was around the pink, the drive topic.
Doing a pink session,
yes.
okay.
It was great. Dave Moll, I think I've got the name right, did a great job in presenting. I want to desperately get my hands on the materials that he used because I think there's a lot of things that we could leverage. Really enjoyed his story about allowing their whole organization to choose what team they wanted to be on and the dynamics around that and their fears. So definitely want to find out more about that. During that session, he did reveal that they've got a book deal, so they will be going into developing a book around that process that they did, and it follows the Spotify model, but the real life application of letting teams choose, letting people choose what teams they're going to be on, and their transition to a very self-organized and working towards a happier workplace.
Okay, so it sounds like, because I know we talked on our last episode, kind of before that session, I know the question I asked you is what was different about that session or would there be anything new in it that wasn't in the book?
Oh yes, there's a lot of things because Dave's actually taking it to the next level. He ended it with what's next, what was missing from that book and so he had some ideas around what he would like to try next to further improve the work life of their employees, because they did have a statistic around with the increase in happiness, they saw a 12% increase in productivity, and so they want to continue to drive that happiness and get even more productive employees.
Super sweet. So what was the actual, for those of us who haven't read the book or didn't see the TED Talk, because I think I saw the TED Talk, but now I'm not sure. So what was it actually about?
So the 3 main tenets that it was driven around was autonomy, motivation, and purpose, and that is what people need in order to be successful. That's right. I got those 3 right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. And so he based a lot of the activity that he did based on the Drive book, but then he added a whole bunch, and they experimented and built upon that. So
it makes sense because the book Drive is very much about purpose, autonomy, and mastery. Really doesn't get into self-managing teams like we have here in Agile. So that sounds really cool that he has some thoughts about maybe how to get started and For those that are looking maybe like to work with leadership, to say there's some substance, because I know something I heard a lot today is people sometimes say, well, how do I make a change? How do I get my boss to agree to do something? And I was like, well, sometimes a book can help with that a little bit, at least to show you're not just, I didn't go to this conference to get this idea that's going to change the world, and your boss is like, okay. So
and there was
good.
also some really good discussion around rewards and how to use rewards or not use rewards. It was a great story about somebody that had a kid that was bouncing a basketball against their garage door while they were trying to work. Rather than yell at them to stop doing that, they went down and said, I love the way that you're bouncing that ball against the garage, and gave them some money and said, I want you to come back and do that every day. And so these kids came back and we get paid, and this was in the UK, so like 5 pence or something like that. And then they stopped paying the kids. The kids never came back because it had been changed into work. And as soon as they stopped paying paid, we're not going to do that work if we're not going to get paid. So some great stories around behaviors and rewards to think about. Certainly there's nothing saying that we have all of the solutions, but a lot of really good things to think about from a reward system and driving towards happier teams to have a better culture and a more productive workforce.
Okay, it's cool.
So yeah.
So who else went to something else? Who else learned something today?
Let me think. I learned some stuff, I'm pretty sure. Actually, one of my favorite stories today was from Jim Newkirk's talk this morning. It was the Agile Bootcamp track, right, that he's one of the chairs of. And I loved his story about, I don't know if Jason, if you were in that one, but I think Natalie and Joe were, where he was just talking about how earlier in his career, his bosses basically told him to lie to a client about a delivery date.
Boy.
And he just, flat out got on the call with a client and wouldn't do it. And, they called him up to the VP's office later and told him that, Jim doesn't want to win. And I really related to that story because I came from an environment a long time ago that's exactly how it was. You said whatever, and it was terrible, totally demoralizing. So I just loved what he said, that, we're looking for people who want to face reality every single day.
And be honest.
Yeah.
Be honest, yeah. It's funny, I was not in that session, but I heard very much the same thing as we said on our last episode. I went to the imprisonment by metrics talk.
That was my second pick.
And that, you didn't go to it, did you?
I didn't get to go to it.
Okay, you didn't go to it. But one of the things they talked about in there was, again, that's imprisonment by metrics. It's like a fake deadline. And it was interesting because what they talked about is, metrics, it's really not so much that metrics are bad, but it's what you use them for and how they're perceived or misperceived. And it was kind of sad. Actually, I really liked the presentation because it was kind of like, it was like telling stories about here's a challenge that we had. And both it was Natalie Warnert and Brandon Carlson. I probably can't read my own handwriting here, but they did a great job of telling stories. And then they, kind of gave us an opportunity to share, times when we had felt, imprisoned by metrics because really someone else on the team or maybe leadership or even in your case the business was using them the wrong way. Because again, if a team wants to set a goal for themselves, that's awesome, but that's a goal. It's a team goal.
Not something to hold hostage.
You shouldn't go set your strategic roadmap off of it, unless you have some predictability, which in this case a lot of teams don't. So I feel your pain there, and I just appreciate it. And it's interesting because it was on the learning track. And so one thing that I've always wondered is where a metrics talk would show up here, because it could be on the boot camp track, like for beginners. But this was actually on the learning track. It was very basic. It was team metrics, because there's a lot of topics on the portfolio track about metrics. But I enjoyed that.
So what did they come away with as far as was there any talk about what the most useful metrics are to track for teams, or from a coaching perspective, which kinds of things should you help teams to be tracking?
Well, so a couple of things there. Obviously, we talked a little bit, a few of us at the table I was at before we started, we did go around and say, what metric do you track? And it basically, the people at the table kind of echoed the version 1 survey that I ripped up a few weeks ago because it talked about velocity. And again, velocity is a great metric for a team to know the impact of changes. The problem is that when leadership or the product management group starts to use velocity, and it's not you can't look at velocity and compare it between teams. It doesn't mean anything. We didn't necessarily talk about metrics that were better. We kind of talked about the metrics that were not ideal, like velocity. And the other thing we talked about that I think it was Jesse Shearhouse brought up, he actually specifically talked about the version 1 survey also, and he said he thought it was interesting that many of the metrics that people use to evaluate the effectiveness of Agile are lagging indicators. Whereas in reality, which was actually the page that I ripped up on the podcast a few sessions ago. Okay, I didn't rip up the page with velocity.
Can you rip up another page of something tonight? Because it's a really good sound effect.
Really, I don't think I have. I could rip up my notes here that I can't read my handwriting for, but yeah. So I thought that was interesting to hear someone else say that, because we should be looking at more leading indicators, things that can predict things. I know a simple one that I shared with the group I was with is I just talked about the happiness metric.
Yes.
Were you happy at work today? Yes or no? And really to use that as a way to show that to your leadership.
Yeah.
And this idea, I know I tweeted it during the session, one of the few things I put on Twitter today was this idea of saying that a lot of times that whole session kind of talked about how leadership or management can and has been known to use metrics to manipulate behavior of the team, right?
Yes.
However, guess what? The team can use metrics to manipulate the behavior of management. Mm-hmm. So if you say, hey, here's our happiness metric, and it doesn't look very good, management, please help us do something about this. And yes, could it be gameable? Sure, but it's a data point. So
yes, and that's certainly something that they talked about in the Damping Drive talk again. Is that just at the end of each day, everybody putting a happy, sad, or medium face and tracking that over time to see what's trending with the team, because it certainly does make a huge difference in your work life, because a day will fly by if you're loving what you're doing and you're passionate and excited and happy about it. And if you're miserable, the hours and minutes and seconds go by so slowly.
So, and I know the metrics talk. I know the slides actually are online. So if you're listening to this,
so the other ones should.
Yeah, they should all be online. So we'll have to figure out how to put some notes about the sessions in our show notes. So if people want to go figure it out and go download the slides for these talks, they can go. Take a look or contact any of the presenters. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk, as we're probably butchering their names here since I can't read my handwriting. So,
and I do want to note, before we go too much further, Jason has chosen another location for this particular talk, and I believe he didn't want to be close to a balcony.
Oh yeah. So instead, we're in a metro station here. We're in the Georgetown metro station. So guess what? You could just throw me in front of the train. Boom. So Joe, how about yourself? You've been quiet over there.
Well, being newer to Agile, I think the most impactful thing of the day was Luke Holman's keynote speech this morning. Especially when it came around the value of games and the power they can have, especially when he talked about helping the city of San Jose fix their budget issues. We've been using games in our office to help teams learn the value of WIP limits and how they can help them deliver more effectively and keep their focus. And it really helped me reinforce the things that I've been working on. I've only been doing Agile about 6 months now, so it was definitely a validation experience this morning to really hear that somebody of that magnitude stand up and reinforce what we've been working on with our teams.
Yeah, and also the challenge that he threw out there too, to have people, take on something that means something personal to you, and apply your Agile skills to that, not outside of work. And this only will, sort of pay it forward type of having everybody gaining some experience in these techniques, so that they can better your community, better your schools, better anything that you're passionate about, your local charity that you're involved with, making any of them more successful, and and take those skills that we learn as Agile practitioners and spread them outside of just the development world. I think that was a great challenge that he sort of ended on. With that keynote speak. It was, fantastic keynote.
Yeah, I've gone through a lot of the boot camp sessions today just because this is my first Agile conference and being newer to Agile, but the spirit of being able to change the world with what we're doing and everybody's excitement about it has really galvanized my dedication to what I'm learning to do now, and it's been really exciting. I'm looking forward to the next 4 or 5 days to gain more and more of that expertise.
Drinking from the fire hose.
So this morning, did he teach any games or any exercises that we want to take back?
He talked through his games, and for those listeners, if you go to Innovation Games, there's a lot of games already out there that are available for you to use. But yeah, that keynote will be available, and he can talk through. There were mods done, and he talked about the concept of where, if you've ever modified any kind of game that you played or made up a new game, you're a game designer. And you're and that thought that just because we as coaches or scrum masters aren't creating code, if you're modifying a game or creating a game, you're a game designer. So it was a very empowering speech overall, as saying, like, don't take for granted what you do on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, certainly those games are out there on Innovation Games website. I know that Jason knows Luke very well, so he may have some more insight to other things that are coming up.
Everything's out there. So, and I know the Alliance will post the keynotes on the Alliance website probably a little bit after the conference. So if you didn't have a chance to hear what Luke said, but yeah, he actually really focused again more on the budget games. And I know his intent was to say that really to take the games and apply them to anything, because guess what? They work. So, and of course, they're not games. As he quoted himself in his own, as he calls it, Luke speak, they are serious collaborative simulations to exercise your strategic objectives. So
yes, for any of you that are out there that may have somebody in your leadership chain that doesn't like the idea of playing useless games, Luke does provide some fabulous verbiage for some strategic exercises
but
that
just as
you
a
can play.
But as a data point, again, not knowing people will listen to this podcast, again, they've rebranded that company, so they still have Innovation Games because that's something they created initially, but now it's called Contenio, and they have a crowdsourced booth here at the expo. But it's kind of sad because it's symptomatic of that, this idea game kind of has a stigma. But if you're listening to this podcast in like 2017, more than likely go Google Contenio and you'll probably see some cool things there. Yep. I know the book will still be published and out there, but so the brand is diversifying. So
yep.
What else do we get? I'm looking through my copious notes that I took that I can't read.
I did Esther Derby was speaking today. Her speech was 6 rules for change.
Ooh, what were they? Can you write them down real quick?
You know what? I actually pulled them up here because unfortunately I don't trust my memory enough, but I've got them here. So first one was work from a stance of congruence, balancing the interest of self, others, and context. So I really liked the focus on empathy because that's been really important to me, and I really value that perspective we all have as Agile coaches of also being servant leaders. So I loved seeing how she focused on empathy as the kind of the foundational thing that you must have to be this change agent in any organization. I thought that was pretty cool. So want me to go through them all?
You want to? Go for it.
She did. Apparently, Rose told me earlier. She gave a shout out to smokers because they use their smoking time for a whole new network of people.
Yes, and that ties into one of her 6 points. So, but I admired her for the courage it took to support the smoker contingency at your office. She was very quick to say, "Don't go out and start smoking, though, but just know that you can use these people and bend them to your will."
Or start a walk
to your will. Because they clearly must be something wrong with them.
Or start a walking club or something. So.
Yes. Some common interest, yeah.
So the second one was honor what is valuable about the past and what is working now. Devaluing what people have been doing makes change more difficult. This was probably my favorite thing about the time that I spent with her today, was just thinking about the ways that we inadvertently devalue someone or something when we as these change agents come into a situation and say, "I want to help, I'm so excited to help you, and I really think that I can make your situation better," without being appropriately respectful or empathetic of how that person might be feeling about what they currently have.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about last time with invitation.
Yes.
Getting invited in and seeking an invitation versus kind of imposing or mandating changes.
Yeah, and there's certainly been instances, we've all heard them, where, well-meaning, but people come in with an agile transformation saying, "I don't know how you got anything done before in this waterfall
Cringe.
environment. Right.
Oh my
and so not
gosh.
saying, you know what, you're great now. You can be even better if we start looking at other ways to improve.
Yeah, she even gave us some example language. So one of the first things she said was, don't force people to admit that they were wrong, but change the way that you phrase that conversation or frame that conversation. And she said something like, up until now, what you've been doing has gotten us here, or it's been sufficient. It's worked so far. Now, and then kind of ... So just kind of giving that appropriate acknowledgement of what the person or the team has done so far, and just changing the way that we present change as not necessarily everything you've been doing thus far is crap.
Right.
You know?
And the same is with growth, right? The change and growth can be taken negatively as if that, well, I'm a grown up. I know what I'm doing, right? And even so, but you can continually grow. People, not everybody embraces that concept as much as some. So
Well, just think about just in daily life. When we want to change something about ourselves or the way we do something, we don't kill ourselves and start over. We take some material that we currently have, and we hopefully kind of enhance it somehow. It's not just throwing everything out and starting over. So figuring out what's good about what you're doing, what you do want to keep is the first step to figuring out what you want to change.
Yeah, but even more basic, actually, to do a little bit of a mashup here, like I was in a session with Christopher Avery today, and he talked about this idea of emphasizing intention and really celebrating. So really, because we're so quick to obsess on what we can't do or what we didn't get done, and we miss the opportunity to celebrate what we did get done.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, we had a goal, like, hey, we want to try to get this plan done this month, okay? And you know what? We didn't get it done. But you know what? Let's think about, before we even say that, let's talk about all the stuff we did get done instead. And we don't, who does that? That's a hard thing to do. And what Christopher Avery was saying is that, guess what? If you emphasize that, it changes the way you think, and it changes the way you lead people. Yep. So it's almost
very similar mindset.
Very similar mindset. So
cool stuff.
So you're back. I think you were on number 4, right?
I'm on. Let's see. Number 3 is assess the current situation and system. What holds the current pattern in place? Who will gain? Who will lose when things change? And then number 4 is what we were speaking about earlier with our smoker friends. Activate networks. These are not the formal networks within an organization, but the more informal ones. Activate networks to diffuse new ideas through the system. Weave in people who are trusted and who people turn to for advice. So the smokers being just one example, but I also thought of like people whose hobbies are similar. I've met people today just because they were wearing band t-shirts that I liked, and I walked up to them and said, hey, that's a really cool band. But there are lots of those kinds of networks within any organization. You just have to tap into those as a coach and figure out who has that kind of relationship with other people.
And again, it's more important because it's based upon knowledge, it's based upon experience, and it's also based upon trust.
Trust, yeah.
And more than likely, none of those things were consulted when your organization may have designed their most recent org chart. So I had a few interesting conversations with people where they were talking about where the org chart fits in with Agile, and I kind of said, well, what you're saying here, these are the more important things. So yes, there's probably an org chart somewhere, which you may have to look at, but we need to move beyond that as a community.
Yeah, definitely.
I liked that concept of who do people go to for advice, because if you think about it, a lot of times the person that you go to for advice might not be the person you report to directly, might not even be somebody who's like technically in your chain of command or whatever. It might be somebody outside of it you've just had a relationship with for years. So I liked that concept of understanding who can influence based on the relationships and the trust they've built. So I thought that was cool. So that was number 4. Number 5 on her track was guide the change. Consider where global principles apply, what can evolve locally and what wouldn't, and work by successive approximation. So I had to think a lot about what she meant by that. And I think what it comes down to is that there are certain things that apply universally, and then there are certain things that are going to be unique to a certain locale, a certain situation, and just that awareness can help you to guide change. So the same things are not always going to work.
Or even down to the same team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Well, yeah, I think one of the biggest things I gained today was also from Jim Newkirk's boot camp presentation early this morning, talking a lot about coaching the why behind process and not just laying process on teams, making sure that they have some kind of handle to actually embrace the reason that they're doing something, and giving them at some point the will to design their own process. And as long as they're still accomplishing the same goal and they're embracing that, then they're actually adopting Agile and they're not just being made to practice Agile. And that's something that I've worked a lot with the teams that I'm working with right now. And they seem to take it and run with it a lot faster if they understand the point of the process that I've installed or that I'm coaching them on, rather than just looking at it as, okay, this is another thing I have to do. But there's a benefit to you, and there's something you're going to gain from this, and allowing them to be part of the design, to customize it to their team's needs, whatever the project might be, really seems to gain a higher adoption rate.
That reminds me of something that Esther Derby said in her afternoon session as well, about getting people involved, even if you create a special little kind of task force for a certain initiative. Just the more people that you can get that have a finger in the pie of something.
It's the coalition of the willing. It's like, oh, we're all back to, it's like that was 8 points that we did on a few episodes back, but John Cotter's Change Leadership Framework, we ran that one down. So similar. So but you got it. There's strength in numbers. So
absolutely.
I did want to add one other thing too. One of the things I've been tracking as I go to different sessions or even just ad hoc conversations, I've started a list in Goodreads of all of the books that have been mentioned that may not necessarily be in the bookstore here or anything like that. So I'll make sure that I get that to John about these are the books that everybody's talking about, either in sessions and so forth.
Yeah, or they typically tend to show up on the tweet stream. So, but
Yep.
if you would like to aggregate that, I appreciate that, Natalie, and I'll even go look at it or add to it. So.
Definitely.
Well, I had 2 quick ones, which was interesting. So that I'll just share, and then anyone else got other things?
I'm good.
Because it is late at night. It's time to go to sleep, right? Or you guys are probably going to party. I have to go.
I've only had 5 drinks. I can fit more.
Oh, really? So I did go to Lean Coffee this morning, and the first topic out of the Lean Coffee thing, which is funny, this is, John, if you're listening, this is for you. We talked about what's wrong with the idea of assessment. And it was inspired, apparently there was a whole bunch of blog posts that in our packet here, our conference packet, we all got a wheel thing. I forget whose wheel it was, but someone's promoting
Yes.
that.
No, I
Saw that.
I bet it's the one that link that you posted.
Yeah, I think that was internal. So we have an internal Slack channel for This Agile Life, and I know I saw it. It was the one I shared to Natalie and John on our chat. So, I forget whose it is, but apparently this is where there were a couple blog posts about that, because it's not a complete measure, and it's very interesting what they're trying to do with that. The only reason I was going to call this quick because this is where at the lead into this podcast says, "Are you agile enough?" Right? There seems to be this idea that agile is more, again, it's a mindset. So I don't know how few answers. We might have to think about if we want to ever change our lead in. And if our listeners are listening and have any comments about what a better lead-in for an Agile podcast is, we'd love to hear what it is.
I always thought you were being sarcastic when you said that in the intro.
I don't know. John worked on that. So
Just kidding.
That's a question. So anyways, we'd love to hear feedback from our listeners. If you guys think that it's kind of interesting as we talk about assessment and measurement, we have a lead-in that says, how do you know if you are? And maybe you don't. So, and the other one, too, that we learned also is the release timing of a podcast during an Agile conference is not very predictable. So if you did happen to listen to our most recent episode, which talks a lot about sessions that were held on Monday, August 3rd, 2015, and you listened to it after the fact, probably not the most valuable thing. So as we continue these sessions here at Agile 2015, we're going to make our presentation more timeless. So you'll hear about sessions that we've been to and things we've learned, and you'll be able to look it up afterwards, and that way it'll be better. So if anyone did listen to our prior episode, I think it was number 91, where we kind of said, here's a bunch of sessions to go to, and it was posted after those sessions occurred. We learned that today, so we're not going to make that mistake again. So,
and I believe, to your previous point, it was the Agility Health Radar.
Yeah, it was something. It was
Yes.
it was a very feisty conversation at Lean Coffee. So
Did you guys ever hear of the Wheel of Morality from? Do you remember back in the '90s there was that Animaniacs, the show on TV? I was a big Animaniacs
That's how I
fan.
learned the States when I moved here.
Yes, the song that they would sing in that show. Well, they have the Wheel of Morality at the end of every episode, and they would have this little song, Wheel of Morality, turn, 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 tell us the lesson that you should learn. And every time I see wheels with a bunch of stats and things on
That's
it,
what you think of.
Immediately I'm in Animaniacs land, and
Well,
I'm 15 years old again.
I think that was the beginning of my day, and then I ended my day with metrics imprisonment. So it was almost very fitting since I could see the wheel there.
Where is that train?
We're in Georgetown here somewhere. Well, I guess that's all we have time for this episode. It's a little shorter tonight, but hopefully you guys who are listening got some things out of it. We will post some links to the sessions that we talked about here in the show notes, so you can go check out the session summaries and also the materials that will be available for download from the Agile Alliance. And we thank you for listening. Give us some feedback and keep living this Agile life.
This Agile Life is brought to you by a community of Agile developers and coaches aspiring to spread the word about this groundbreaking approach to software development. Join us at thisagilelife.com/community.